thanks everyone that joined. Saturdays, I wasn't even aware there's like a user group that met on Saturday, but super excited to be here and kind of show you our product. So I'm going to kind of focus more on the Intune side of things. It sounds like that's what this month's session was more about. But one thing I will note is the same functionality that we're seeing here with the ability for us to create third-party applications and updates in Intune also exists in Config Manager. If there are any, is there anybody here, if you could leave a comment that uses Config Man only, and if we have some time, maybe we can jump in that near the end of the session if we get through the Intune piece early. Okay, cool. So what I'll do is just kind of jump right in. So we're going to walk through how our product integrates with Intune. If this looks interesting, you can have a full trial that includes all the functionality of our product, including all the third-party products that we support as well. So it's going to be just like if you were a customer, you get full access to do everything that I'm showing you in this demo. So what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and from our trial page, I'm going to go ahead and go to our documentation page. So docs.patchmypc.com, this is where we have our step-by-step guide for how you can install our product to automatically package and update third-party apps in Intune and ConfigMan. This is basically a step-by-step guide. It will walk you through the entire process of what setting up our product looks like. And in addition to these guides, we do also have what we call a setup call or a guided install. This will be where you can get on a call with an engineer from our team, and we'll actually walk you through in your environment what it looks like to set up our product. So it's actually pretty similar to what I'll be doing here, where we're setting up in our lab. The only difference is we'll help you set it up in your environment. Now, if this demo does look interesting, we do also have from this page where you can schedule a live demo. Same kind of concept. You just choose a date and time that works for you. So let's say you wanted something on Monday. You can go through and kind of see what's available with engineers in our team. And you can even add additional guests like people from your company that you wanted to attend to kind of see the demo as well. So that's kind of a good next step if this demo does seem like it would be a product that could provide you some value here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the MSI. So it's about 5 meg. For Intune, it doesn't really matter where you install this publisher tool, which is going to be the UI where you can select which applications and products you want to publish into Intune. And once you kind of select the products, this will be fully automated, going forward. Cool. So just basic installation here. Now, what I'm going to do is, since we're at least focusing on the Intune piece of this to start, I'm going to enable the Intune standalone mode. What this will do is this will by default disable some of the checks that we have for a configuration manager environment where we may be publishing third-party updates and apps to Config Manager. So this just kind of simplifies the UI and it makes some of the checks where it doesn't worry about things like the WSUS signing certificate, for example. So that's the option I'll choose for this demo. Go ahead and kick that off. And this will be kind of the initial UI that you get when you install our tool. So if you were to go get a 30-day trial, you would get a 20-character license key. And then you could just go ahead and activate that, and that will be valid for 30 days. Now, one thing that you may notice is we're not going to worry about all the certificate requirements that would be applicable to WSUS if you did check that Intune standalone mode. Now, one thing that I will note is, let's say that you're in a co-management where you're managing apps and updates both in ConfigMan, and then maybe you have your workload for apps on some computers to Intune via co-management. This same tool would have the ability to publish to both at one time. So you could have both your ConfigMan apps that you select and your Intune apps all from a single installation here. And one thing I will note is if you do have questions, feel free to come off mute or put in the comment box. Ideally, like I'd be happy if you come off mute and just interrupt me throughout the session. Love to get questions. It kind of makes things a bit more interesting because there's probably other people that have similar questions that you have here. So what I'm going to do is kind of jump over to our Intune tenant. And what we can see today is we don't have any applications showing up here. So what we're going to do is kind of go through and choose which products that we want to kind of make available and automatically push into Intune so that we don't have to manually package those apps and updates for these third-party products. Now, as far as our products go, we have, it's I don't want to speak wrong, but it's constantly evolving. That's why, the numbers may be around 400 or 500 or so different products. And on our supported products page, you'll be able to see everything that we support today. So for example, if you just wanted to, even before you trial it out, if you want to see, hey, what Java products does Patch My PC have, or what Open JDK products do we have? So you can do a quick search and kind of filter down here and see all the different products that would be available. So things like, the new open source ones now that Oracle Java is paid. You can just search for whatever you wanted here, right? So a good way to kind of see what we have today. Now, one additional thing to note is if there's a product that we don't support today, we do have a user voice at ideas.patchmypc.com. This is where our customers can come in and they can request new features or products that they want to see added. So for example, if we sort by popular, you can see kind of the top requests we have. So the ability to support multi-tenancy. This is primarily a feature requested by managed service providers. This is currently the most popular user voice request that we've just recently started to, we're in the early stages of starting to code that and see what that looks like and get feedback around that. But we're constantly taking feedback from our customers around what apps and features they want. And from this user voice page, you can also go out to our public roadmap and you can see which new applications and which features we've recently shipped within our product. So for example, anything that has a dark blue new products tag, these are going to be new products that we've added to the catalog based on customer feedback. So on average, we're going about 5 to 10 new products per month. And this is something that we're actively trying to dedicate more resources to even move quicker, to have a larger catalog for products that actually matter to our customers based on their feedback. So, this list is constantly kind of evolving. Now, since this list is rather big, like if I go and kind of expand all the products, you may not necessarily know which products actually exist within your clients within Intune. So we do have this feature where we can click this database scan. And what this will do, I guess the only prerequisite that I want to cover before we actually start digging in here is before we have access to your Intune tenant, you do have to create an Azure app registration and give us the correct permissions to actually go and connect your tenant. So I've already pre-done that. We have this fully documented step-by-step guide, and it's a relatively minimal permissions that you need. So for example, we need the ability to go and create apps. Obviously, this is a big piece of what we do. If you want to allow us the ability to kind of read devices in groups, this will allow you to manage your assignments within our tool and have them automatically create assignments in Intune. Not all of these are required. So for example, if you use the option for us to set scopes on your application so that you can limit which admins can see it, this is an optional permission, but if you use that specific feature, you would need to make sure we have that. The same thing with enrollment status pages. So if you were adding apps to ESPs, you would need that permission, but it's not a requirement. Some of these depend on the feature sets that we use. And in the more info link within our UI, we'll link you out to show you kind of which permissions you need here as well. So step-by-step guide, you could either do this yourself, or if you wanted to get on one of those free setup calls with an engineer, we could help walk you through this initial setup. Okay, so back to that scan feature. What we can do here is we can connect via Microsoft Graph, and we can actually query which products are already installed on devices within your Intune tenant. Now, one thing that I will call out is within Microsoft Intune, they do only inventory today products that were installed via a MSI or Windows installer. So the inventory that clients send up to Intune would not include exe-based installers. So it's not going to be 100% today, but we're actively working through whether we can either have a feature that kind of collects more, or realistically, we're kind of hoping the Intune team starts to extend their inventory they collect and send up to Microsoft Intune via Graph. We hope that they just extend that to include EXE-based installers, since there are a lot of products that do use EXEs rather than MSIs to install. So it's not going to be 100%, but we will be able to detect which info that we can use here. Yeah, that's a good question. So this is the question from Rune. Could we pull it up using the ATP or Defender, whichever name they rebranded to, that includes kind of the full list of inventory? So this is something we're actively looking at. This would obviously require the customer to have that additional license where they're using some of the endpoint like ATP inventory data, right? So it wouldn't work for 100% of our customers, but we are looking into ways where we can query different areas of Graph, since Intune doesn't include it all. Some of the other places within Microsoft products like ATP, they have a larger list of inventory through the Defender kind of agent, if you will. So we are actively looking. We just want to do that in a way that, you know, we make it so it's easy to understand that, hey, this will only work, you know, if you have this license. So maybe when you go and add your tenant ID and you check your permissions, maybe there's a way we can kind of query to see if you have that license and make it a dynamic where we would only query that if you have it, just so that it's kind of transparent in the background and you wouldn't really, you know, get confused there. So yeah, great point. We're looking at what we can do with Defender data for sure. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to enable a couple of apps for time's sake. Now, the apps, the way that they work by default is they're going to be a totally silent installation and update. So what I'm about to show is totally optional, but it's a way that you can really customize how the updates and apps take place. So what we can do is we can right click on the all products level, and we can apply kind of some global settings that you can control the way that all the updates being applied through Intune work. So for example, let's say that I wanted to delete desktop shortcuts. I could right click and say for any update that I enable in the future, I want to make sure that it deletes the shortcut for that product on the public desktop. I can also do things like disable the self-update feature. So let's say that I wanted to control exactly when updates took place. You could disable the updates so that the product just doesn't go out to the internet whenever you want, right? So some ways to kind of control when that happens. Now, one of the more helpful features from like a IT perspective for troubleshooting is we can also say we want to automatically enable the logging for my product. So what this will do is if it's an all MSI products, this would be supported on. And the vast majority of EXE installers that support a command line switch, this will also work on those. So what we'll do is when the update's being applied in the back end, just by you checking this box, we'll automatically control and append the command line parameters to create logging for that vendor's installer. So this can be helpful if an update ever fails to apply. You'll actually be able to troubleshoot from the vendor's perspective of what happened. Instead of just getting a generic 1603 exit code that's reported up through Intune, you would actually have somewhere on the client where you can understand specifically what happened for that scenario. Now, what I'm also going to do is, I'm at the all products level for Intune apps. Rather than, what I'm going to do is enable a couple of products here, but let's say hypothetically, you went through and you enabled like 100 or 200 different products that you wanted to create apps for in Intune. And let's say that you wanted to make those all be available to all your users in Intune via company portal. I wouldn't want to have to manually go into Microsoft Intune and go add an assignment for each one of those applications that we create. So what I can do is I can click on Manage Assignments at the top all products level. And let's say that I want to make that available to all my licensed users for Intune. So I'm just going to go check this box. And what that will do is automatically create an available deployment for me. And if I come in here and kind of click, once I add it, if I click the actual group, I can then see options that you would be familiar with within Intune. So Do you want to make it an offset? Do you want to allow restarts? Like if the app required a restart, do you want to force things like grace periods and stuff like that? Also for like the notifications, do you want to show all notifications, only restarts, or hide notifications? So a lot of these settings that correspond to Intune, we can just do them once and have them apply for all our deployments that we have here. Looks like there's a question from Jonathan. Are you guys able to integrate any of the third-party apps used by EDU for online testing? Probably. Like, do you have an example of maybe one that we could see if it's already been requested? The real thing that we're looking at here is, does it have a silent command line? Does it install successfully using system context? Does it have a public download link? That's probably some of the three main factors that will make it easy for us to add. Okay, so like a lockdown browser. Yeah, so if it supports all of those, it's definitely one that we'll add. I see we do have one request for it. It looks like it hasn't got a lot of traction yet. So, regardless of whether you're a customer yet, I would say go ahead and vote this up so you can use up to 3 votes. And what will happen is if we ever make progress on this, you'll automatically get an email that says, hey, this is now in development and this is now shipped. So I would say definitely go vote this up. And the second example of the browser you had, if that one's not here, make sure you get that request in. Because yeah, I mean, if we don't know customers want it, we're not going to have it on our radar for sure. So first step, make sure it's in, submit some votes so that you can stay up to date as we, are evaluating new products we're adding. Cool. So other thing we have that we can do at all products is manage categories. So the categories within your apps in Intune, we can automatically set those for all the apps. Now, this is a feature where it probably wouldn't make sense to set this at the all products because you're likely going to define the categories at like an app level. You probably don't have, unless you have like a generic category for like all the company apps, maybe you could do it here. But for now, we're not going to set this at all products. We'll set this at the specific app level. We can also add apps to enrollment status pages. So this is one where, if we enabled a bunch of different apps, we probably wouldn't do this at the all products level. You would probably choose which apps are, applicable per each ESP, for example, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to 7-Zip. And I'm going to enable 7-Zip to 64-bit MSI. I'm going to enable this as a app. So once we click on the individual product level, there are some additional customizations that we can apply per product. So for example, we can add custom command lines for each product. So if you wanted to add like a license key or some type of parameter via command line, you could do that. And what we can also do at the product level that isn't applicable to all products is you can add a custom pre or post update script. So maybe you wanted to lay down some additional configuration files that are unique to your environment. You could do that as well. So for the question around what is the reason you're using Win32 app for managing Patch My PC? Could you clarify that a bit more? Are you saying like an on-prem app versus like a SaaS app? You can come off mute too if it's easier.
Yeah, sorry. Why do you require an app that's installed rather than like a web interface? Like,
yeah. That's a great question. So the main reason that it's a Win32 app today is we originally started kind of the product as integrating with ConfigMan and WSUS. So it made sense to kind of be on-prem at that point. And then we extended a lot of the functionality that we had already coded, some of the customizations, which we'll dig in a little more. So it was primarily due to the fact that, we already understood how to process all these applications and updates via our tool. And we only had to then extend that to Microsoft Intune using the Graph APIs. So the initial reason was mainly just speed to market. is why we extended the existing tool set to also connect to Intune. Now, with that said, one of the top feature requests that we have on our user voice is to extend our Intune functionality specifically to a SaaS portal. So the current big project that we have today is we're adding multi-tenant support to our tool right now. So once we develop and ship this feature, I think a big focus that we'll probably have will then be the SaaS portal. So there's a couple of ways that we're approaching this. One thing that we do know is it's going to be a lot more cost efficient for the on-prem version of our tool that connects to Intune, because we won't have to worry about cloud fees. So I think we're going to basically be running in both places. So there might be some MSPs or customers that would prefer a cheaper SKU where they would just use the tool that we're looking at here. But then there's definitely going to be customers that would prefer to just be cloud only, no on-prem infrastructure. So that was the original reason, was kind of speed to market and understanding the technology that we already use to be able to create and really customize the apps in a very unique way. But with that said, SaaS and like cloud only is definitely something that we're thinking about doing for sure. I don't think we're at the point where we have a timeline yet, but it's a big feature, and we know it's something that's going to be very important that we'll be thinking about. Cool. All right. So with that said, so we have 7-Zip I just enabled as a Win32 app that we're going to create into Intune. So what I'm going to do now is, let's say that I want 7-Zip to go out to all my devices during the enrollment status page. So when they come on through autopilot, let's say 7-Zip we want to always have out there via ESP. We can use that right-click feature to always have the latest version of 7-Zip deploying to our devices. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. If you had custom scopes, we can automatically read the scopes over in your Intune tenant. So if I come over under tenant administration and security, if you did control, which admins can see which apps, you could have these apps apply to specific scopes if you wanted to. For this purpose, I'm just going to use just the default scope. We could also do like a featured app and company portal. So just a lot of different customizations that you can apply if you have the use case. These are all, really optional. So for example, let's say that we want to give that 7-Zip. Let's give it the file archivers category. This is something that your users in company portal would be able to see and filter on that. So we'll go ahead and apply that.
So with the ESP setting, should Patch My PC automatically pick up apps that you have published but you manually put into an ESP previously? So if I have it in an ESP that I created manually without putting it into the ESP using the actual settings within Patch My PC.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So you applied it manually in an ESP.
Because it looks like I've looked at this and I see that 3 of my apps showed up, but I have like, I would say 12. So I was wondering if that's how it should work or if it's only working partially for me, but probably something for engineering to ask.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me see if I can get the link to this meeting. See if I can get one of our software engineers to jump on. If he's able to jump on, I'll have him answer for sure. If you added it manually to an ESP, I'm not 100% sure if we'll automatically keep that ESP up to date if a new version of that app came out, for example. I think you have to have the checkbox per the app, but I could be wrong. But I'll see if Cody can jump on. He wrote that feature. And we'll sync back up if he does jump on. But if not, I could follow up. Just shoot me an email, Justin at Patch My PC, and I can get you the answer for sure. But I don't know off the top of my head, but great question.
No problem.
All right, so that's our Intune app. So this would be where we could install the app if it doesn't already exist, right? So, that's really the way apps work. But now we're going to jump over to the Updates tab. And the way the updates work in our product is these would only apply to machines that already have the app installed and they are out of date. So yeah, okay, yeah, it looks like you can jump on in like 20 minutes or so. So we'll see if cool. We'll see if he gets on in time, but if not, I'll follow up via email.
All right.
Cool. So the updates will basically flow into Intune, and they'll only apply, like I was saying, if there's already an out-of-date version. So the key difference there from like a deployment perspective is I'm going to enable some of the same right-click options that we saw for the base applications, like the logging and everything else. But the key difference here is that we wouldn't really make these available. We would make these required assignments. So for example, what I could do here is and say any update that I enable, I want to make available to all my devices as required. So what will happen when these automatically get deployed to your machines, we're going to have applicability logic built into the app that will say, is this app already there? And is this app out of date? And the update for these products would only apply if both of those conditions were met. One key thing here to kind of mention is for Microsoft Intune using Windows Update for Business, they don't have an extension today like WSUS where you can really have a lot of flexibility. So that's why we essentially built the logic into a Win32 app via Intune to handle the update logic that would typically be done through like the Windows Update agent, for example. So we have requirements and applicability rules on the app, which we'll dig into once we actually go and jump into Intune. But that's the reason why we can have a broader deployment, and we can let the detection methods that we basically use on the app level determine whether or not this update is actually required. Okay, so what we're going to do is for the updates, we're going to have a Google Chrome update. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you some of those custom right-click options specific to an app. So on the application here, I'm going to go and add a custom post update script. And just to give you an example of kind of how you could customize deployments for your environment if you needed, we're just going to run a post action script that's going to set the Google Chrome homepage for all users, just editing the Chrome policy key just to patchmypc.com. So we can see the homepage location, opens in a new tab, and we can see we're just setting some values on that key to customize that. So just an example of how that would look. So that would get applied anytime a Google Chrome update gets installed via our updates. Now, the next update that we're going to apply is for Notepad++. And what I'm going to do is show you some of the flexibility that you can get as an admin to control what happens if your end user has the application open when an update needs to be applied. So there's a few scenarios where this comes into play. So I'm going to right click on Notepad and choose that Manage Conflicting Processes option. Now, majority of applications will work just fine in updating, like while the app is in use. You'll just get like a pending restart. So similar to the way that cumulative updates work for Windows updates, for example, you'll probably just get a pending restart because a file change couldn't occur, but it will apply on the next reboot, for example. But on our KB guide here, we do have a list of products within our catalog that we know the vendor's installer, typically these are going to be exe installers that don't have great logic if they're open, will not successfully apply if the user has it open. And in some cases, they may even leave the product corrupted because some files got removed, but maybe the main exe didn't get removed and it couldn't get deleted because it was in use. So Notepad++ is actually an example of one where if the user has it open and an update is trying to be installed silently in the background, it can actually leave you in a bad state and sometimes a corrupted state. So this feature is really intended to control how you want to handle those scenarios. So the default option is it will just attend the installation even if the user has the app, and that works for the majority of applications like I mentioned. But we then have three options that you can use to control kind of those unique situations where you need to know what's going on. So for example, we have the ability to automatically close the update or the app and apply the update. This will give the user no interaction. This would force close the app and then the installation would simply apply. We then have an option where you can skip it. So if the user has it open, it will just skip the update in the background and will apply try again during the next scan cycle via Intune or the software update scan cycle if you're using ConfigNet. And then lastly, this is a newer feature that we have, is you can send a pop-up notification to the end user that has the app open, and you can allow them to either apply the update now or snooze it for later. So there's a variety of different options that we have here. So by default, we're going to give the user 5 minutes to make a selection. If they have Focus Assist enabled, by default, we're going to just snooze it on behalf of the user and discard it. You can say always show the notification, but if they're in like a PowerPoint presentation, it's kind of up to you to determine what you want to do. We can then control how long they can defer it. So let's say they can only defer it up to 3 times. Yeah, and then that's going to be kind of the key ones that we'll look at here. Now, what we also have is manage the actual global settings. And this is where you can apply custom branding to that pop-up. So the default kind of notification, if I click preview here, this will show you what the end user would see. So they would see something like your organization requires the update to be applied. By default, we have just kind of like an update related icon. Now, what you can do here is you can have custom org name. So we could say something like Patch My PC requires it to be closed. We can add custom branding. So if you wanted something like unique to your company with like your logo on it, so it's kind of more trusted, you could do that. What I'm going to do in this example is we've got some notifications, some GIF themes that we can download. These are available from our website as well. So let's say we want to make it a little bit more modern. We want to have like a banner that's moving. We could preview how this looks as well. So, this is just kind of making it a bit more like the Windows Update pop-up where, you can see, hey, I need to close something, an update's kind of being applied. You can also totally customize the text that happens. So for example, you can have English say a specific thing. You can have different language support. Then you can customize things like the way the header looks. So the header text, the body text, just a lot of different things you can do here to really make it unique to your environment. Now, one thing that I will call out as well is we're not actually using the built-in Windows 10 Toast feature. We're actually using a .NET form. So this will also work on Windows Server. This will work on Windows 7, Windows 8, the way that this UI works for this pop-up notification for your user. Cool. So I'll go ahead and apply that and choose Apply. Now, what I'm going to do now, let me just enable some additional logging here. And I'm going to come over to my sync schedule and I'm going to start my synchronization. So if I go ahead and open up our log, what we're going to basically be doing at this point is we're going to be talking to Microsoft Intune via Graph. So this is going to be how we communicate with your Intune tenant and automate the publishing of apps and updates. Now, one thing that I'll mention here is once you come through and you actually configure which applications and updates that you want to publish, everything going forward is going to be fully automated. So this tool just kind of runs in the background. You don't really have to come back into it. And it's just going to publish and kind of keep these up to date for you. But while we're waiting for that to kind of publish, one pretty cool feature that we have is, you're probably going to want to stay up to date with what's actually changing in your environment. So we have both email alerts and Teams alerts that you can enable. It also works with Slack as well via webhook that will notify you whenever something has actually changed within your environment. So if I refresh Teams here, let's open that up. We can see that we just got the alert just now, 9:34 a.m. that the application for 7-Zip got created. So we can see it was also assigned to my users, and it was just a typical update. It wasn't security or anything like that. If we also click the app name, we'll take you out to the release notes for that product. So you'll be able to see all the release notes for that specific product. Here in a second, we'll see it looks like we're actively working on Notepad. So there's the alert for, Notepad is getting uploaded now. But here's the update that got created for Google Chrome. So we can see that we can go out to the release notes for Google Chrome, just like we did for the app for 7-Zip. We can see this one was a required assignment because it was an update to everybody. We can see it was a critical severity with a security classification. And more importantly, we can see that there are actually some CVEs that were associated with this Chrome update. So if I click on the link, we can actually see the vulnerabilities for that specific CVE for that specific Chrome update that was just published to your environment in real time. So you can really get some details about what third-party apps, like what fixes are going out, is it security related? So some pretty cool things that happen in the alerts for teams. Yeah, so good question. So Christopher, you just asked, can you run it from multiple, can you run a single install to multiple tenants? So that's really what I was mentioning in kind of that user voice over here. Currently the most active user voice, so we're actively starting to code this where we can have a single installation to a multi-tenant configuration. So we don't support it today, but we're actively working on that. I know David James is kind of heading that up. He's our new VP of engineering. Many of you might know him from Microsoft. He used to run the entire configuration manager engineering team. So he's actively kind of working with our engineering team through that. We just started that probably the last month. We're actually spending some coding and some resources on that. So my goal is as soon as we can, we're going to have a multi-tenant support where we can have a single installation. And the way at least the internal coding is looking is you'll kind of have like a drop down over here where you can add tenants and you can drop down and choose specific configurations for kind of the apps you want on each tenant. So then we'll have that one-to-many relationship where you can have multi-tenant support. I'm optimistic, but I don't want to give a timeline, but I can tell you right now, it's pretty much the entire focus currently for our engineering team is adding multi-tenant support for Intune. So jumping into my Intune environment, if I come in and look at my applications now, we can see those apps are automatically created now. So we have our base application for 7-Zip, just our normal app. And then we have kind of the special updates that will only apply if an outdated version is there for Chrome and Notepad. And any of the updates will be appended with update 4 in the title. So, you can see this is an update for Notepad, update for Chrome. Now, if I go ahead and look at that 7-Zip application, we're going to automatically populate all the metadata for you. So things like the name, description, keywords, icons, everything will be ready to go. Release notes. Here's that custom file archiver category that we added via the right-click option. One additional thing that we can see is the available deployment for all users was automatically created via that right click that we did at the all products level as well. So we wouldn't have to worry about manually going in, deploying all of these individually. You could do that via that single click that we had over here, where we said we want to deploy this to all users, right? Same thing for the 2 updates. So if we go ahead and look at our update for Chrome and Java or Chrome and Notepad, we can come in here and see that. Now, while we're digging in and kind of looking at some of these, I'm going to go ahead and start up one of my Intune clients just so we can get logged in here and get kind of that checking in on the background. So let's get that started up.
Justin, is there a way you can deploy like to ring 1, ring 2, ring 3?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned that. I missed that piece, but yeah, so I'll show you how that will work. Jumping back over, let's say that you wanted to have your updates. So I'm in the Intune updates. Get logged in here. There we go. All right, so let's say that I wanted my updates to go out in Ring. So I can go back over to manage assignments. Now, the way that I did it initially, this obviously wouldn't be great because there's no rings. I basically said, hey, let's go out to everybody and let's go out as soon as possible. So this wasn't great for testing, right? But let's say that you wanted to have ring deployment. So what I could have done here is, let's say that I have my test group, right? And I want that test group to go out ASAP. So right when we have a new app, I want that app to be assigned as required to everybody. But then, maybe we have a test group number 2, or, for this example, I'm just going to say my HR is my ring 2, right? So we'll go over here. And for the deadline, for example, to stage this, we could say, we'll make it available right away. That's fine. But let's actually stagger that out for 1 day. So ring 2 would be, deployment time plus 1 day. And then let's say for all users, we come over here. Let's say we want to do deployment plus 3 days. So, if we ever had a scenario where an update was breaking something internally, we would be able to come through and be able to kind of change that deployment to delete it, or refactor or delete the specific update 3 days from now, right? So yeah, you can definitely go through and kind of control this and kind of ring it out. So when we were building this, we were essentially kind of looking at the ADR functionality of config manager, where you can have multiple deployments. So we wanted to kind of simulate what that looks like from a config man perspective. So yeah, you can definitely go through and kind of stage these out in a very unique way, where you can have them kind of kick off in that manner. Yeah, good question. All right, cool. So we've now jumped over to the client. So one thing that we probably missed is we did have the Google Chrome icon up here. So what was actually happening in the background is Chrome was actively applying the update. So we can see it went from version 68 to version 88 because it was a required assignment as soon as possible. So on the Intune client logs and our Patch My PC logs, this actually, this has already occurred. So we've already gone through and the Chrome update's been applied. But in the background, so this is the Notepad++ update pop-up that's showing up because I have Notepad open. But while we're waiting, I won't go through that yet. We'll kind of go through and look at what happened with Chrome first. So in the background, what happened is, if you recall, I enabled that right-click option that enabled the logging feature of Chrome. So this is actually the verbose log of Google Chrome. I can open that up. And if Chrome, let's say hypothetically, if Chrome were to fail, this is where I would be able to go see what happened from the client perspective. So this is the actual verbose log of Google Chrome's MSI installer that I could go in and look at. In addition to kind of the vendor's log, we also have a kind of monitor log from our end. This is in a format that supports CM trace. So for example, we can see that Google Chrome was kicked off up here. So there we go. So this is actually when we launched the Google Chrome update. It started at 41 after in 8 seconds. We can see it completed at 41 after in 37 seconds. So this update took 29 seconds to run. We can see it completed with an exit code of 0. So that was a successful update. We can then see, based on my right-click option, I deleted the public icon for Chrome. And then I also set 3 different notifications, or I'm sorry, 3 different registry values to turn off self-updates. So these 3 values that happened all in the back end on the client that we figured out for you was all based on that single right-click option that I did at all products, that I said, I want to disable update. So this is what actually happened in the client side. And you can see all this happening in our log files real time on the client. And then the last thing that we did here is we ran the custom PowerShell script to set the Google Chrome homepage, and we can see the script completed with exit code 0. Next up in the same log file, we can see that the Notepad++ update is now kicking in. So here's where we can see things like the command line is /s. We can see that we had the user pop-up enabled. So for example, we can see we're actively in our log file. We can see that the UI pop-up is currently launched. And once this is closed, we'll see this log kick in and actually start the installation of Notepad++. So a couple things I could do here is I could, of course, snooze the update. I could close an update right from our pop-up. Or let's say the end user closes Notepad++ directly. So that's what I'll do. We're going to detect that and automatically start the installation. So we can now see that we just ran the install of Notepad++, the exe, exit code 0. We can see it took 1 second to apply. We then deleted the shortcut for it as well on the public desktop. So if I go ahead and refresh, we were at Notepad 791. We are now at 792. The user got kind of prompted, hey, you need to go close this. And then lastly, I didn't get to it in time because the update was already initiated, but the Google Chrome homepage was just google.com before. What we'll see is when we launch this, because we had the post-update script applied for PowerShell to set the homepage, we can see that it changed it to patchmypc.com. If I go ahead and look at the about of Google Chrome, we can also see that the updates were automatically disabled via those red settings that were configured within our pop-up. So just an example of, those 3 values that basically told Chrome, hey, even if I go to the About tab, I don't want to let my users go and check automatically. Yeah, so that's the 2 updates for Chrome. What I can do next is I can go ahead and kick off 7-Zip. So this would be our base installation. So for example, we can see 7-Zip is not currently in add remove programs. So this should, hopefully this kind of Intune is going fast for us. The updates did go pretty quick. So hopefully the 7-Zip will kind of kick in and get installed for us pretty quickly. But what we'll see going on here is if we go back to the logs, there's our, so here's our 7-Zip verbose log. So this is for the app install. We can see the verbose logging. It looks like it completed successfully. And back in that Patch My PC script runner log that kind of monitors all the updates, we can also see the application, not just the updates, log out to the exact same location. So exit code 0, the update completed in 2 seconds. And now 7-Zip is installed. So if I refresh, I can see 7-Zip is here. I can go ahead and launch that from the start menu. And now we have an app that wasn't there. So I think, one of the key things is, we support both the initial installations of apps as well as kind of keeping them up to date once they're already out there. Lastly, we do have some Power BI dashboards. So we have one for Intune that you can use via Microsoft Graph. We can basically pull some data and you can get some basic info about, for the updates and apps that you've deployed, like how many are actually installed or required, meaning the update's not quite installed yet. So we don't get, at least today, Intune doesn't have as rich of metrics as Config Manager for like compliance and apps and very detailed info, but we do have this Power BI dashboard that can give you some good info. So rather than having to go into, let's say, Microsoft Intune and have to look at each apps individually, like you would typically have to do. So if I refresh Chrome, I can see that Chrome is now installed on one machine, so we're compliant. If it was not installed, that means it would be, that means it would basically have an older version. So we can basically query and get all this data for you so you don't have to go to each individual app. And we're also always looking at ways how we can, grab data from Graph and give you better metrics. But ConfigMan, at least, that's been a product for 20 years. There's not quite a one-to-one for very rich info via Intune, but we can get you some good data through our Power BI template where you can at least see, how you're looking overall for all the apps and all the updates. But yeah, that's the whole demo. So let's just go into questions. I'll see if I missed any in the chat, but anyone that wants to come off on mute, I'd say, yeah, let's take some questions just directly.
I just had a general Patch My PC question, which once again, I haven't looked into the docs. It's probably outlined somewhere, but the script runner exe itself, if that ever is updated, are packages that have been created updated as well with that update?
No, not by default. So if an app has already been created with a previous version, we don't update by default. But there is an option where you can choose to republish an app. So let's say that, for example, you publish Google Chrome and the script runner version was 1.0, right? And let's say that we release this doesn't happen. I don't think we've ever had a scenario where we had to re-release an update to script runner to fix something on the client or the way the update's executed. But let's say there was some specific fix for something with your environment. This republish option would allow it to update it, but by default, unless you click this, like if you're working with support and there's some specific fix that maybe fixes something very unique to a problem you're working with our team on, this feature will allow script runner to be, it basically would replace the whole Intune win file, which would include script runner.
Nice.
But by default, let's say that we update our publisher. So we usually do about monthly releases. Within each monthly update, we do generally update script runner on the client side. It might be new right-click features or it might be something else. By default, only new updates or new applications that are released after that, like a new version of our product, would get that new version. But if there is some unique case, you can republish the content, which would include the latest version if we were working with you for something specific.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. No, just was more curious on the inner workings, so thanks.
Yep. Pricing, I see there's a question around pricing. So jump over to request a quote. We do have a pricing table kind of over here. So the features that I showed you today, this was our Intune SKU. So this is $2.50 per device. And this is per year. So I will want to call that out. You know, a lot of subscriptions are monthly. We do have MSP pricing. So if you want MSP pricing, just use the contact form on our website. And I think in our FAQ page, we do also have an FAQ for MSP pricing. See if I can find that real quick. Yeah, so yeah, I think yeah, so it's actually sales. So I'll send you this FAQ, Chris. Yeah, so just send an email here and we can go over some of that details. But back to the price, yeah, so it's per device, but it's annually. But one thing I do want to call out specifically, this applies more so for Intune environments, it seems, because they're often smaller. We do have what we call a starting kind of min price. So if you're smaller, kind of the starting price would still be $199, so about $2,000 per year, regardless of device count. So that just helps us cover things like support, demo, setup calls. Just make sure that we're not losing money because this is a yearly subscription and it's quite affordable. So if you do have like 100 devices, I wouldn't want you to go request a quote just based on this demo and think, oh, I'm going to get this for $250 a year for all 100 computers. So we do kind of have that starting price, and you can click this link. And this kind of describes more about why we made that decision. But that's what, yeah, that's what pricing looks like. From the staggered releases, yeah. So I know we went into some of the rings. We do have the ability to keep multiple versions of the products. So by default, we don't delete previous versions of products. So let's say that Chrome 88 came out and you were at 87, you could still have both 87 and 88 at the same time. But one thing that we do is the default behavior is, let's say that you had an update for Chrome 88 and version 89 came out. If this checkbox is kind of here to copy, we're going to remove the assignments from the old version of the app, and we're going to add them to the new version of the app. So we built this functionality before supersedence was in beta in Intune. So we basically kind of created a supersedence type feature where we would copy the old versions of the assignments to the new ones. So you're always deploying the latest update. You can optionally, if you want more change control, you could uncheck this. But by default, we do also keep old versions around. So you could have multiple versions of a product. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. Okay, some comments around, how great support has been for people working with us. Just kind of reading through some of these to see if there's any I missed here. Cool, so I think I've gone through all the questions on the chat. So we covered pricing, we'll look at FAQs. One thing that we often get is like competitor questions. So I'll include a link here. So we do have like some public reviews from like things like Gartner and G2. So I just linked out to kind of this scenario. So if you ever were thinking about, should I use Patch My PC? Should I use somebody else? We do have some Gartner and G2 comparisons against some of the competitors in the space. So this will kind of give a breakdown based on actual customer feedback that's kind of verified through Gartner or G2. So you'll be able to see like how people rate things like support, initial setups. So this can be a great thing, if you're kind of comparing products, you can go through and kind of look at the different scenarios from, these different sources like Gartner or G2. So that. Any other questions people want to ask? Come off on mute.
I just have a comment that looking at the product over the years, the amount of effort and development in the product is just simply amazing. You and your team have done definitely an amazing job with the product. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We definitely have an all-star team that, very dedicated and focused on, listening to feedback. And I think that's where, each time we do the demos, when new things come up, it's really based on that customer feedback and our team, really focusing on that. So it's fun to see kind of how things have evolved over time for sure. Yeah, so for the trial, so question about the Intune trial, 30 days, is it limited? No. So if you come in here and you request a free trial, it's not limited. It will include all features and all products. So it'd be just like you are licensed customers. Yeah, so question, are there any white papers around security? We do. So we have a data sheet here. There we go. So I just included a link to our data sheet. It kind of covers some of the value pitch, like, if you're trying to sell it to management, stuff like that. And we also have an ROI page. I'll include a link to this that kind of covers some of the security updates, like how many we average, like for 2020, for example, how much time it saved our customers on average. So I'll include both of those links to help you with that. Other questions?
I'm gonna stop the recording if everyone is okay with that.